My family laughed when I said I wanted to become a doctor. They told me I wasn't smart enough, not pretty enough, and that medicine was for men. Years later, my sister was rushed into emergency surgery, and her nurse bowed when I walked in and said, "Hello, Chief of Surgery." Suddenly, I wasn't the failure anymore. Asterisk asterisk, my name is Lena. I used to think silence was safety, that if I kept my head down, studied hard, and followed the rules, maybe one day I'd matter. But growing up in my family, silence didn't protect me. It erased me. I was the middle child. My older sister, Bianca, was the golden girl. Prom queen, flawless skin, always perfectly dressed, and according to my mother, the one who'd bring honor to our family. My little brother Theo was the genius. Built a robot in 8th grade, hacked the school's attendance system for fun, and received a coding scholarship before he even graduated. And me? I was just Lena, quiet, bookish, awkward with frizzy hair and hand-me-down shoes. I was the phase everyone assumed would pass, the weird one, the disappointment, the one no one saw, unless I made a mistake. I remember one Thanksgiving I must have been around 16. I made a pumpkin pie from scratch. I'd spent the whole afternoon in the kitchen, dusted with flour, trying to make something that might get me a sliver of praise. When I placed it on the table, Mom looked at it like it was a school project. "Oh, that's cute, Lena. Just put it next to Bianca's centerpiece, will you?" I did, and no one touched it. They were too busy listening to Bianca talk about how her boyfriend had taken her to a rooftop dinner, or how her modeling photos had been featured on a lifestyle blog. I sat there, a fork in my hand, nodding quietly, unnoticed. Later that evening, when I found my untouched pie still sitting there, I took a slice and ate it in the laundry room. Cold, alone. I knew even then I wasn't their favorite. I wasn't even on the list. But I had a dream. It wasn't flashy or easy to understand. I wanted to be a doctor, specifically a surgeon, not because I wanted praise, not because I wanted to be better than anyone, but because I remembered what it felt like to be powerless. When my grandmother passed away, it was sudden, and no one knew what to do. The helplessness in the room, the chaos, I didn't want to feel that again. I wanted to be the person who walked in and did something, who knew what to do when everything was falling apart. So I told my parents. Quietly. I still remember the way the living room looked: Dad flipping through his newspaper, Mom scrolling through her phone. "Mom, Dad, I think I want to be a surgeon." Silence. Then a snort. From Bianca. "Surgeon? Seriously? You fainted watching Grey's Anatomy." I didn't. I just didn't like the fake blood. Dad folded the paper slowly, as if savoring the dramatic pause. "Lena, sweetheart, medical school isn't for everyone," he said with that patronizing tone. "You know how competitive that is, and we don't have money to throw at pipe dreams." "But you're paying for Theo's coding camp in Switzerland," I replied, instantly regretting it. Mom's eyes narrowed. "Don't be petty. He has potential." The message was clear. He was worth investing in. I wasn't. I said nothing after that, but that night, I searched for scholarships. I researched programs. I printed out application requirements and taped them behind my closet door so no one would see. My dream wasn't dead. It was just something I had to protect. In school, I pushed myself. Straight as. Volunteered at the local clinic. Read anatomy textbooks when others were partying. My guidance counselor told me I was one of the most determined students she'd ever seen. Still, every time I brought up my ambition at home, the air would grow cold. Mom would change the subject. Dad would sigh and mention how much debt med students drown in. Bianca would smirk and say things like, "Don't worry, if you fail, you can always do nails." Eventually, I stopped talking about it altogether. But I didn't stop chasing it. When senior year came, I applied to every pre-med program I could afford the fee for. I didn't tell anyone. I worked weekends at a diner to save up. I studied until my eyes ached, and then it happened. I got my acceptance letter to Hanover University, one of the top pre-med schools in the region. I opened it in the bathroom stall of my shift at the diner, hands shaking. I pressed the letter to my chest and just cried, not because I was happy, but because for once the world said yes when everyone else had said no. I ran home that night, burst through the front door, the letter trembling in my hands. I got in. To Hanover. Pre-med. Full scholarship. Bianca looked up from her phone. "What's Hanover?" Mum barely glanced up. "That's nice, dear. But don't get ahead of yourself. College is a lot harder than high school." Dad murmured something about student loans and responsibility. That was it. No hug. No celebration. "No, we're proud of you." Bianca got a dinner party when she landed a brand deal for posting tea detox ads. Theo got a custom gaming chair for finishing a coding course. I got an indifference. But in that moment, I knew something important. They would never be my cheerleaders. But I didn't need them to be. I would build a life without their applause. Because one day, I would walk into a room and they'd have no choice but to see me. And not just see me. Stand when I enter. Asterisk, the hardest part about chasing a dream isn't the sleepless nights or the brutal exams, it's doing it with no one in your corner. When you have no one waiting for you to come home. No one to say, "You're doing great. Keep going." That first semester at Hanover, it broke me. I didn't know it was possible to be so tired. My days started at 6 a.m. and ended well past midnight. I juggled biology, organic chemistry, calculus, and anatomy all while working a part-time job at a 24-hour coffee shop off campus. I couldn't afford books, so I borrowed worn-out copies from the library or bought the cheapest, barely legible, used versions from the bulletin board. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, nights I asked myself if my parents were right, if I wasn't cut out for it. If I was delusional. I had no car, so I biked everywhere. Rain, snow, didn't matter. Sometimes I'd arrive soaking wet to my labs, my sneakers squishing on the tile floor. I'd sit in the back, take a deep breath and focus. Because no matter how exhausted or humiliated I felt, I still wanted this. But rejection letters came first. Didn't get accepted into the research assistant program I'd applied for, or the competitive anatomy lab I was hoping to shadow in. My GPA dipped my first semester, and my confidence dipped right along with it. When I called home, my mother barely asked how I was. Instead, she updated me on Bianca's engagement. Her fiancé had money, an investment banker from some wealthy family. Mum was practically humming with joy. She's planning a destination wedding. And Theo got invited to speak at a tech conference in Singapore. "Oh," I said quietly. I passed my physiology exam." "That's nice, sweetie." "Hey, you'll help Bianca with decorations, won't you?" I paused. Double quotes, Mom. "I won't be able to afford a flight to her wedding." Silence. Then the sound of her sighing. "You always make everything about you, Lena." I remember staring at the blank white wall of my dorm that night, gripping the cheap plastic phone so tightly. I thought it might snap. That was the last time I called home for a while. I withdrew. But somehow, I didn't give up. I dug in. Harder than before. I started studying in the quietest corner of the library, made flashcards for every chapter, and forced myself to do mock interviews for med school prep with whoever would help. I made friends with one of the janitors, Martha, who worked the night shift. She started bringing me tea and telling me, "You remind me of my daughter. Smart girl. Keep going." I held on to that. One person believing in me was all I needed. Then came sophomore year. I landed a research assistant position with Dr. Glassman, a cardiac specialist with 0 patients and sky-high expectations. He was known for being tough. Students often cried after his critiques, and I was terrified of him. But I worked hard, showed up early, took notes, cleaned his lab without being asked. After 3 months, he called me into his office. I thought I was being fired. Instead, he looked over his glasses and said, "You're not the smartest in the bunch, Lena, but you've got grit. I'd rather train someone with grit than a genius with an ego." That moment, it cracked something open inside me. For the first time, I felt seen. He wrote me a recommendation letter for a summer pre-med internship in Boston. I got it, and everything changed. That summer, I assisted in real surgeries, shadowed residents, asked a million questions. I was obsessed in the best way. While other interns took breaks to post selfies in scrubs, I was reading case files, staying late, taking every moment seriously. I loved it. And more importantly, I was good at it. When I returned to Hanover that fall, I was different. More confident, sharper. I knew I belonged here, even if my family still didn't believe in me. I emailed my mom about the internship, told her about the cardiac case I assisted on. She replied a day later. "Bianca's getting a custom dress, made in Milan. Also, please send Theo a birthday gift this year. He said you forgot last time." That was the moment I stopped trying to make them proud. I told myself, "You don't need their applause. You're not performing for them anymore." So I moved forward. I graduated with honors, got into med school, and from there, the real storm began. Med school was brutal in ways I can't describe. People think it's just textbooks and scalpel practice, but no one tells you about the emotional weight. Holding someone's life in your hands, seeing death, seeing children in pain, holding crying parents. But I was built for this, because I'd already spent my whole life dealing with pain. No one else could see. My classmates called me ice, but not because I didn't care, because I stayed calm when everyone else panicked. When I got my first real scrubs with my name embroidered on them, I took a photo in the mirror of the hospital locker room. I never posted it, never sent it to my parents, but I kept it. Proof that I was doing it. Without them. One day during residency, I was scheduled to assist on a complicated orthopedic trauma case. A young woman in her 20s bike accident, multiple fractures. Her fiancé came in yelling, demanding to know who the surgeon was. When I stepped into the room, he blinked. "You're Dr. Lena?" I nodded. He looked stunned. "You're so young." I smiled under my mask. Unqualified. That surgery was a success, and I was promoted shortly after. Later, I found out that guy. He was a junior partner at Bianca's fiance's firm. Life is funny that way. People you once stood beneath will one day look up to you and not even know it. I hadn't spoken to my family in almost a year by then. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to. They never asked how I was doing. So I let them assume. Let them think I was still that quiet, invisible girl. The next time they'd see me, I'd be walking into a hospital room, and they'd be sitting, waiting. ****, my last name, Bennett, used to mean nothing in the hallways of hospitals. Now it echoed. When I finally earned the white coat with Dr. Lena Bennett stitched in cursive across the chest, I stood in front of the hospital mirror and stared at myself for a long time, not because I wanted to admire myself, but because I wanted to remember every insult, every ignored conversation, every time someone rolled their eyes when I said, I wanted to be a doctor. And most of all, I wanted to remember the silence. My family didn't send flowers, didn't attend the white coat ceremony, didn't call. Bianca was on her second honeymoon. Theo was launching a startup. My parents? Probably still watching reruns of whatever reality show they binged like gospel. I posted a quiet photo on LinkedIn. Just my name, just my badge, just that coat. Nothing dramatic. But within 24 hours, I got a message I never expected. It was from Bianca. Oh my God, you're actually a doctor now. That's wild, LO. Mom said you were still in school. I thought you gave up. No congratulations, no warmth, just confusion, and maybe a hint of envy. I didn't reply. What was there to say? Instead, I dove into work. I earned a spot in the trauma surgery program at St. James Medical Center, Level I trauma hospital known for seeing the worst of the worst. Gunshot wounds, car crashes, critical organ failures. I worked in the trenches long nights, blood-stained scrubs, missing holidays. But I was thriving. There's something poetic about saving lives, when your own family never thought yours was worth investing in. I earned respect the hard way from senior surgeons, residents, and even nurses who at first assumed I was just another timid intern. I wasn't loud. I didn't brag. I just showed up. Again and again. Confident. Steady. Unshaken. One of the nurses, Myra, once said to me, Dr. Bennett, you don't talk much, but when you do, people listen. I smiled at that. Because for so long, I was the girl nobody heard. I worked my way. Up, case by case, life by life. Eventually, I wasn't just one of the surgeons. I became chief resident, and later, acting chief of surgery while my mentor went on sabbatical. The day that email arrived, naming me acting chief, I sat in my car for a full 10 minutes. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I did. I wanted to savor the feeling. I'd spent so much of my life trying to prove I was enough. Now, I was more than enough. I was the person they called when it mattered, when it counted, when lives hung in the balance, and yet my parents still didn't know. Or maybe they didn't care. One day, I was reviewing charts after a particularly grueling trauma shift. When my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello? The voice on the other end was shaky, feminine. Lena? It's Mom. I froze. It had been almost 2 years since I'd heard her voice. Mom, I said cautiously. There was a pause. Then she burst into tears. It's Bianca. She collapsed. They said it's serious. We're at the hospital. I didn't know who else to call. I blinked, stunned. What hospital? St. James, please. Please, if you're nearby, come see her. I don't know what's happening. Her fiance's out of town, and I didn't hear the rest. My mind was already racing. Bianca. In my hospital. In critical condition. Of all the hospitals in the state. Fate brought her here. And now, the family. That dismissed me, ridiculed me, ignored me, needed me. I stood, grabbed my coat, and headed toward the A. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel victorious. I felt calm, like this moment had been waiting for me all along. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped into the emergency wing. As soon as I entered, I saw my parents seated on the far side of the waiting area. Frantic. My mother looked older, pale, her hands trembling. My father was pacing, eyes red, muttering under his breath. Neither of them noticed me at first. Then a nurse stepped out from the trauma bay mirror. She looked around the room, saw my parents, then saw me. Her expression shifted. And then, in front of everyone in that waiting area, she bowed her head slightly and said, "Hello, Chief of Surgery." My parents' heads snapped in my direction. Their eyes widened. Mom's jaw dropped. Dad froze. Mid-step. Silence. I walked toward. Then slowly, my badge clear, my coat crisp, my confidence unshakable. "Where's Bianca?" I asked calmly. Mom tried to stand. "Lena, you're the..." "Yes," I said, not offering more. "What happened?" Dad stammered. They said it might be internal bleeding. She fainted at brunch. She was unconscious for minutes, and I'll take it from here. That's all I said. I turned, walked through the doors, and disappeared into the trauma bay. Behind me, I could feel their eyes following, finally seeing me, but this time, not as the failure. As the only one who could save her. Asterisk as I entered trauma. Room 3. I felt the shift. The energy changed, not because I was scared, but because I was walking into a situation that was both personal and clinical. My sister, Bianca, the girl who once told me I'd never make it, who laughed at my dreams, was now the patient. My patient. She was unconscious on the bed. Pale. Hooked up to machines. Her perfect hair a tangled mess, makeup smeared. Her fingers twitching faintly beneath the floor. She looked so small. I stood there for a moment longer than I usually do. Not because I hesitated, but because I had to compartmentalize the storm inside me. I wasn't here as the forgotten sister. I was here as the chief of surgery. I flipped through her chart. Low blood pressure. Elevated white count. Abdominal tenderness. CT scan results pending. Possible internal bleeding. Maybe an ectopic rupture. Maybe appendicitis. Maybe worse. I called in a senior resident and barked orders like I would for any other case. Run the scan again. Get me a surgical consult from OB/GYN and notify anesthesiology. We prep now. I want her in OR 4 in 20. Mira, my favorite nurse, moved swiftly beside me. On it, Dr. Bennett. I glanced back at Bianca. She had no idea I was here. That I was the one holding the scalpel that might save her life. Would she even want me to? I pushed the thought away. This wasn't the time for emotions. Not in the OR. Not in the trauma bay. As I scrubbed in. The weight of everything, the years of being overlooked. The rejection. The silence echoed in my memory. And yet, here I was. Steady hands. Sharp mind. Clear focus. When Bianca was wheeled into the OR, unconscious and unaware, I was already there, gloved and masked, and I did what I always did. I performed. The diagnosis was acute appendicitis that had ruptured, and aggressive infection was spreading. Another 6 hours, and it might have gone septic. We worked fast, my team moving in unison. We cleaned the cavity, removed the rupture, stabilized vitals. The moment we closed the final stitch, I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. She was going to live. Not because she was lucky, but because I'd made sure of it. I left the OR, stripped off my gloves, scrubbed down, and changed into my hospital-issued sweater. I always kept it in my locker for post-op hours when the adrenaline wore off and exhaustion kicked in. Then came the part I wasn't trained for. Facing my parents. They were still in the waiting room, clinging to each other like frightened children. They stood the moment I stepped out. My mother rushed to me. "How is she? What happened?" I looked her straight in the eyes. She lived. We removed a ruptured appendix. There was a lot of infection, but we caught it in time. Her hand, flew to her mouth as she began to cry. My father placed his arm around her and looked at me with something I couldn't quite place. Pride? Shame? Or, you saved her? He asked, voice low. Yes, I did. Silence. I expected them to thank me, but instead Mom whispered, I had no idea you were this. This? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Dad tried to clarify. A doctor, a real one. I've been a real one for a while now, I said, voice even. You just never asked. Their faces said it all. They didn't know how to process this. Their daughter, the one they dismissed, mocked, and ignored, was now the one they owed their other daughter's life to. Can we see her? Mom asked softly. In an hour. She's sedated and recovering. We'll monitor for infection closely over the next 24 hours. They nodded, unsure of what to say. I could feel their unease. The ground had shifted beneath them. They no longer held the power in the room. I did. I turned to leave, but my mom called out, Lena. I paused but didn't look back. Thank you, she said, her voice cracking. I nodded once, but inside, I wasn't sure how I felt. Gratified, vindicated. Not really. Just tired. I sat in the staff lounge that evening, sipping burnt coffee and staring out the window at the city lights. Mira came in, carrying a pastry. You didn't eat all day, she said, setting it beside me. Thanks. You okay? She asked, sitting across from me. I shrugged. It's weird saving someone who never believed you could. She gave a knowing smile. You don't have to forgive them. I looked up. You're not obligated to make them feel better about ignoring your light for so long, she said. Sometimes you just save the life and walk away. I nodded slowly. She was right. Just because they saw me now didn't mean they ever really would. Later that night, I checked on Bianca. She was awake, groggy, eyes fluttering open slowly. I stood at the end of her bed, arms folded, no smile, no pity. Her eyes landed on me. Lena? She croaked. I nodded. You're here. I didn't answer. Her eyes welled up. You were the doctor? I still am, I said quietly. I was the surgeon. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I didn't know. I thought you gave up years ago. You thought wrong. She opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to beg for comfort. But I turned and walked out. Not because I was cruel, but because I had patients to see. Lives to save. And I had already given her the greatest gift I could. Another chance. Asterisk. The next morning I arrived early. The hospital halls were still dim, the overnight staff switching out with the fresh-faced day shift. I liked that hour before the chaos began. Before people started buzzing around in a hurry, trying to beat time. I reviewed patient notes, checked Bianca's labs, and saw that her fever was down. Her white count was stabilizing. She was improving quickly. She'd be fine. Physically, at least. Emotionally, I wasn't sure. That wasn't something I could fix with a scalpel. At around 10 a.m., I saw the familiar figures of my parents walking toward the ICU wing. They didn't recognize me at first. I'd changed into navy scrubs, tied my hair up, and had my badge tucked under a stethoscope. But when they came closer, my mother's eyes locked with mine. Lena, she said gently, like saying it softly might make it easier for her to admit how wrong she'd been. I stopped walking but didn't greet them. Dad cleared his throat. We were wondering if we could speak to you. Privately. I motioned them into the small consultation room nearby. 4 sterile walls, a circular table, and chairs that creaked when you sat. They sat. I didn't. We owe you more than a thank you, Mom began. I said nothing. We were wrong, Dad added. About you. About everything. Still, I stood, arms crossed. We were so focused on Bonka's beauty and Theo's tech skills. We didn't see you, Mom said, voice cracking. We didn't see how much strength you had, how brilliant you are. We failed you. I blinked. Not because I was moved, but because I'd waited years to hear words like that. And now that I had, they felt like paper. Thin. Late. Fragile. I didn't need you to believe in me to succeed, I said, my voice calm. But it would have been nice. Dad lowered his head. We didn't mean to make you feel less. You didn't make me feel anything, I replied. You told me I was less. Again and again. You laughed. You rolled your eyes. You told me to aim lower. My mother's eyes glistened. Can we fix this? I paused. That's what they always wanted, wasn't it? For things to go back to how they were comfortable. For me to pretend nothing happened. For me to erase years of hurt with a hug and a half-hearted apology. I shook my head slowly. I'm not angry. I've moved on. But I don't need your approval, Mel. I don't need your forgiveness. And I'm not here to make you feel better. They looked stunned. But we're family, Dad said. So was I whispered. But no one noticed. I left before they could say anything else. I had charts to review. Lives to save. Nurses waiting for decisions. Interns who looked at me with the respect I had never gotten at my own dinner table. And you know what? That was enough. Bianca was discharged 3 days later. I didn't say goodbye. I let my team handle the discharge. I signed the papers from my office and moved on to the next surgery. But before she left a note, folded neatly on my desk. I stared at it for hours before I opened it. Lena, I don't know how to face you now. I spent so much of my life trying to be the best, trying to shine, and I never once thought to ask how you were doing. But when I woke up and the nurse said you saved my life, I realized something. I looked down on you because I was afraid that if you ever reached your full potential, I'd lose the spotlight. And I did, because you're not just the best in the family, you're one of the best I've ever seen. Thank you for saving me, even when I didn't deserve it. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just folded the note and placed it in my drawer beside my ID from my first year of med school. It was a reminder of who I used to be. And how far I'd come. A few months later, the hospital held a formal ceremony. My position as chief of surgery was made permanent. I stood on stage in front of colleagues, interns, press, and hospital board members. Cameras flashed. Applause rang out. I gave a short speech. I thanked my mentors, my colleagues, the patients who trusted me. I didn't mention my family because they hadn't been part of this story. Not the real one. As I walked off stage, Myra grabbed my arm and whispered, "Your parents are in the back row." I glanced over. Sure enough, they were there. Clapping, crying, too far to reach me. Exactly where they'd always been. Behind me. Asterisk. It's funny how quickly the world starts to pay attention once other people start clapping for you. After the ceremony, where I was formally appointed chief of surgery, I began to notice the subtle shifts, not just in the way my colleagues treated me, but in how my family tried to edge their way back into my life. Suddenly, my father was forwarding me articles about medical innovation. My mother was texting me links to family vacation homes, casually mentioning, "We'd love for you to come this year. You've earned a break." And Bianca? She was posting photos of her recovery journey on social media. Glossy images of her full bandage, inspirational quotes beneath her eye-shadowed gaze. But what caught me most off guard was this one caption. I was saved by someone I never thought I'd need. Sometimes, the quiet ones become the ones you owe your life to. Thank you, Dr. Bennett. Tagged me, suddenly, people from our past former. Classmates, neighbors, even distant relatives started commenting things like, "Wow, your sister's a surgeon. And she was always so smart. I knew she'd go far." Lies. All of it. They hadn't known. They hadn't believed. But now that the proof was irrefutable, now that the title was official, and the applause was loud, they wanted to rewrite history. But I remembered every chapter. I remembered skipping meals in college just to afford lab fees. I remembered my mom telling me Bianca's wedding was more important than another boring test. I remembered my dad saying, "You can always change majors." Maybe something more realistic. I remembered it all. One Sunday afternoon, I got a text from my mother. Just one sentence. "Would you be willing to come over for dinner? We'd like to celebrate you." I stared at it for a long time, not because I wanted it, but because part of me, that child who used to watch Bianca be praised for everything, even just showing up, wanted to know what that would feel like. What would it be? Like to sit at the dinner table and be the reason for celebration? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I spent the day volunteering at the women's shelter downtown, offering basic medical support to women who didn't have the luxury of insurance or even safety. I felt more connected in that small, warm room full of folding chairs and quiet courage than I ever had in my parents' house. Still, the question lingered. Could I go? Should I? Eventually, I said yes. The house looked exactly the same. Same beige paint. Same immaculately trimmed hedges. Same chipped welcome mat that never really meant it. My parents greeted me at the door like I was a guest. Mom wore her favorite pearls. Dad had on his best polo shirt. Bianca was there too, thin and composed. Her signature smirk softened now into something more careful, measured. Dinner was elaborate steak, potatoes, fancy wine. The kind of meal we never had unless company was coming. And apparently, I was the company now. They toasted to me, told stories about how I always had her nose in a book, and how Lena never gave up. Like they'd always believed in me. Like they hadn't spent years brushing past me as if I were a shadow. Honestly, Mum said, swirling her wine, "We should have known. You were always the most determined." I smiled politely. But inside, I was numb. Because this wasn't about me. Not really. It was about their guilt, their image, their desperation to feel included in the version of my life they never helped build. After dinner, my father pulled me aside into the study. He closed the door and looked at me with glassy eyes. "I'm proud of you, Lena. Truly. And I know I didn't say that enough when you were younger." I nodded, unsure what he wanted. "I just hope we haven't lost you," he added. "I hope we can make up for lost time." I studied him, this man who once told me to stop aiming so high, to be more like Bianca. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel anything sharp. I just felt distance. "You didn't lose me," I said softly. "You just never knew me." And with that, I left. Back in my apartment that night, I made tea and sat on the balcony. The city buzzed below me, sirens, laughter, traffic, life, constant, chaotic, beautiful. I thought about how far I'd come. About the girl who studied in janitor closets and ate cold ramen while memorizing vascular anatomy. About the student who was told she wasn't good enough, pretty enough, loud enough. About the surgeon who now made life or death decisions on a daily basis. And I realized I didn't need their pride, because I had mine. and mine had been forged in fire, not flattery. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a panel for women in medicine. The topic? Overcoming doubt in the pursuit of purpose. I stood on that stage, microphone in hand, 1,000 eyes watching. And I said, when you come from a family that never claps for you, learn to clap for yourself. When your wins are met with silence, make noise anyway. The world doesn't get to decide your worth. You do. And the applause that followed, this time, it was earned, not begged for. After the panel, something strange began happening. I started getting invitations not from just medical institutions or conferences, but from them, my family. A baby shower for a cousin I haven't spoken to in years. A barbecue at Theo's new condo downtown. Bianca's bridal photo shoot redo because the first one didn't capture her journey of healing. Suddenly, I was no longer the invisible one. I was the inspiration, the success story, the one everyone wanted in the background of their selfies, like some kind of human trophy. Dr. Lena, can you believe it? Someone would chuckle, nudging me at these gatherings. She always was the quiet one. They wanted my presence now, my title, my accomplishments. But they didn't want the years of isolation, the nights I starved, the hospital floors I mopped between exams, the years they ignored my calls. They wanted the polished version of me, the woman in heels, the crisp white coat, the Dr. Bennett who commanded rooms and headlines. But not the Lena, who was once left alone at the school talent show, because her family forgot it was her night. Not the Lena, who once cried on a park bench because her mother told her, "You're not like Bianca, sweetie. People don't look at you the same." And certainly not the Lena who taught herself suturing on oranges because she couldn't afford an anatomy model. They wanted my brilliance, but not my story. A few months later, I received a call from a local women's health nonprofit. They were opening a new surgical center in a low-income neighborhood and wanted me to be their keynote speaker at the launch gala. It was everything I believed in: service, purpose, healing where the world often turned a blind eye. I agreed immediately. The evening came, I walked into the room in a navy blue suit, hair pulled back, heels sharp. People stood when I entered. No one had to announce me. My name carried its own weight. At my table sat doctors, survivors, nurses, and medical students from underrepresented communities. We laughed. We cried. We talked about how hard it is to be a woman in medicine, to be overlooked, underestimated, and still rise. And then I saw them. My parents. In the back of the room. Bianca was with them, in a white sheath dress and pale pink heels. Her scar was barely visible now, her smile soft. They'd come without telling me. Later, I found out it was because my name had been printed on the banner outside. Dr. Lena Bennett, Chief of Surgery Street, James Medical Center. My mother had whispered to my father, "She's everywhere now." So they came, not for me, for the validation. To be able to say they knew me when. That night, I gave a speech, one I didn't prepare on paper. I stood at the podium, heart steady, voice sure. They say resilience is born in silence, that the strongest voices often grow in rooms where no one listens. I am not here because I was believed in. I am here because I believed anyway. I am here because I knew that purpose doesn't need applause. It just needs persistence. And if there is someone out there, listening, thinking that no one sees them, do, because I was you. There was a long silence before the applause started, but when it came, it thundered through the room. After the event, as I packed up my things backstage, my mother appeared in the hallway. Alone. She looked smaller somehow, less composed. You were amazing, she said, voice shaky. Thank you, I said, but I didn't smile. She looked down at her hands. I just wish I'd seen this version of you sooner. I looked at her for a long time. And then I said, calmly, this version was always there. You just chose not to look. Tears welled in her eyes. I was wrong. I know. She stepped forward, maybe for a hug, but I took a half step back. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it because healing has boundaries. And forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. I've made peace with it, I said. But I don't owe you more than that. She nodded, eyes full, lips trembling. I understand. And maybe, for once, she actually did. Weeks passed. I stayed busy. The center launched. The hospital promoted new interns. My days were long, meaningful, fulfilling. One afternoon, as I reviewed post-op notes, my assistant buzzed in. You have a visitor. Who? She didn't give a name. Just said you saved her once. I furrowed my brows when I walked out. Into the waiting area, I saw her. Bianca. In jeans and a hoodie. Hair in a bun, makeup free. She looked real, human. Tired. Hi. She held something in her hands, a small envelope. I wanted to give you this. I took it. Inside was a photo. A photo of us as kids. Me, Bianca, Theo. Sitting on the porch steps. I was maybe 10. I had a book in my lap. Bianca had a crown. Theo was holding a stick like a sword. I found it in Mom's attic, she said. I realized. I don't remember ever asking what you wanted to be. You didn't. I'm sorry. I looked at her. And for the first time I didn't feel pain. Just clarity. I used to wish you'd see me, I said. Now, I don't need you to. She nodded slowly. But I still do. And then she left. Quietly. That night, I framed the photo, not because I missed those years, but because it reminded me of how far I had come, of the little girl with the book, the one who used to dream alone, who now stood as the woman people trusted, with life itself. Asterisk. My office walls are filled with plaques now. Awards, commendations, letters from patients and former students. A few framed photos of surgeries that made the news. A feature in Modern Surgeon Monthly. But my favorite thing? It's still that childhood photo Bianca gave me. Me, small and unnoticed with a book in my lap. Every time I glance at it, I remember how invisible I once felt. And every time I think, that girl didn't disappear. She just became undeniable. I was sitting in my office one rainy afternoon, reviewing the transplant schedule when the hospital administrator knocked. You have a special guest in the waiting room, she said, her voice laced with curiosity. She said she used to be your high school guidance counselor. That name hit me like cold water. Mrs. Lansing. The woman who once told me, you should probably apply to nursing school instead. Being a doctor might be too ambitious. I told the administrator to send her in. When Mrs. Lansing walked in, she looked stunned. Her eyes went wide as she took in my office floor-to-ceiling windows, the framed Harvard diploma, the assistant who offered her coffee, and me, in a lab coat with Chief of Surgery stitched in clear navy thread. She smiled nervously. Lena, I saw your name on the hospital website. And, well, I had to see if it was really you. It is, I said, standing but not offering a hug. She glanced around. This is incredible. I never imagined, well, not because I didn't believe in you, but, students sometimes change. No, I said evenly. You didn't believe in me. You told me to aim lower. Her face flushed. I was trying to be realistic. I leaned forward slightly. Good thing I wasn't. She looked at the photo on my desk. Is that you? Yes, I said. That's the girl no one saw coming. There was a beat of silence before she whispered, I'm proud of you. I smiled, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. Thank you. But I didn't need that then. And I don't need it now. She nodded slowly and stood. Well, I just wanted to say congratulations. And then she left. I watched her walk away, her umbrella bobbing through the rain. Funny how people from the past show up only after the storm clears. Later that night, I attended a scholarship dinner held in honor of women breaking barriers in STEM fields. I was one of the keynote speakers. One of the young recipients, a girl named Neera, walked up to me afterward with trembling hands and said, My parents don't believe in me, but I want to be just like you. I knelt so we were eye level and sighed. Then start now. Don't wait for them to clap. Clap for yourself. She hugged me like I was handing her the blueprint to a better life. Maybe I was. Back at the hospital the next week, I was doing rounds when a new intern asked, How do you stay so calm all the time? I paused and said, Because I've already survived worse than anything this building can throw at me. He blinked, confused. I smiled. Try growing up with a family that only sees you when you're on the news. He laughed nervously, but I wasn't joking. A few months later, Bianca invited me to her baby shower. I didn't go. Instead, I mailed her a copy of What to Expect When You're Expecting, along with a small note. Asterisk. For when the time comes that your child feels unseen, remember me. And choose better. Asterisk. She texted me a week later. I will. Eventually, time softened the sharp edges. My parents stopped trying to act like they were always proud. Instead, they asked about my day. Asked how many patients I'd helped. Asked if I was tired. It was a start. I no longer needed an apology from them. What I needed was acknowledgement. And slowly, finally, that came. Sometimes we'd have dinner. It was awkward at first. But I noticed something. They listened more. Talked less. And when I mentioned a new project I was leading for underserved medical communities in rural areas, my dad didn't change the subject. He said, That's incredible. My mother nodded. You were always meant to lead. I didn't correct them. I just smiled. It was around that time that the hospital sent me a proposal. They wanted to name a new wing after someone in the surgery department. Someone who had changed lives. Reshaped the hospital's future. Led with integrity and compassion. The vote was unanimous. They chose me. The Dr. Lena Bennett Surgical Wing. At the dedication ceremony, I stood outside the new building, sunlight beaming off the glass doors, my family seated in the front row. Bianca held her newborn. Theo wore a quiet, reverent expression. My parents. They didn't speak, but their eyes never left mine. When I gave my speech, I didn't mention them. I spoke about resilience, grit, late nights, lost voices that find their way back to themselves. This wing isn't about me, I said. It's about the power of not giving up when everyone else already has. It's about the girl who studied with library books and the woman who now mentors future surgeons. And most of all, it's for every kid who's ever been told they'll never be enough. You are. You always were. The crowd stood. I closed my eyes for just a moment. And behind my lids, I could still see her, that little girl on the porch with the book. But now, she was standing, and the world was finally listening. Asterisk. After the surgical wing was named after me, people started looking at me differently, internally and externally. New interns would whisper in elevators when I stepped in. Doctors with 20 years in the field would ask me for input, for guidance. Board members mentioned me in press releases. But I wasn't chasing fame, not then. Had spent so many years running uphill that when I finally reached the top, all I wanted was to breathe freely, quietly, purposefully. That's why I started. Saying no more often. No to public interviews unless they highlighted a cause bigger than me. No to social media posts that reduced my story to hashtags. No to appearances that my family subtly nudged me into. Like I was some kind of prop they could wheel out to impress distant relatives. I was done performing. Now, I was living. I spent my evenings volunteering at the free clinic, mentoring young women, or just walking through the city with a cup of black tea. My peace didn't come from applause anymore. It came from knowing I had built something real, lasting, earned. Still, life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. One chilly November afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Bianca. Hey, I know this is weird, but Mom's not doing well. She fainted. The doctors think it's cardiac related. We're at St. James. Just like that, history repeated itself. Only this time, it wasn't Bianca in the adult. It was the woman who once said, "You'll never understand sacrifice until you have children of your own." The same woman who told family friends that I was still figuring things out, even when I was already in med school. My mother. I grabbed my coat. I didn't hesitate, because that's what surgeons do. We move. We act. We show up even when the person on the table once doubted our worth. When I arrived, I could already hear the tension in the waiting area. Bianca was pacing. Theo stood beside her, looking drained. She passed out during lunch, Bianca explained. Her heart rate was erratic. They think it's an arrhythmia. I nodded calmly. Is she conscious? I asked. Barely, Theo replied. She's scared. I turned to the nurse station. Where is she? Room 9. Dr. Kanthis is attending. The nurse answered when I entered the room. My mother looked fragile, small, hooked to machines, a cannula in her nose, and a sheen of sweat across her forehead. She turned her head slowly. Her eyes met mine, and in them, I didn't see pride. Saw fear. Lena, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm here, I said gently. Are you taking care of me? I shook my head. Dr. Campus is your attending. But I'm here to make sure you're safe. I'll stay close. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I'm scared. I sat beside her and took her hand, not because she had earned it, but because I had grown. You're going to be okay, I said, pressing my fingers around hers. We'll take care of you. The old me might have used that moment to prove something. To ask, do you see me now? But I didn't need that anymore. Because she did. And so did everyone else. After the procedure, a minor pacemaker placement mom was stabilized and moved to recovery. She asked for me the next morning. I walked in, not wearing my lab coat, just a cozy cardigan and a quiet expression. She looked up at me, eyes clearer now. You didn't have to come, she said. I know. But you did. I'm a doctor, I replied. And I'm still your daughter. She stared at me for a long moment. You know, I used to think I was protecting you by not encouraging your dreams. I thought I was saving you from disappointment. I raised an eyebrow. By telling me to lower my standards. She closed her eyes. By not understanding who you were at all. There it was. A rare honesty. Not sugar-coated. Not framed as good intentions. Just regret. She looked at me again. You became everything I never imagined. And everything I wish I'd supported. I didn't respond. Sometimes silence says more. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Not because you're successful, but because you're kind, despite everything. I stood, adjusted her blanket, and said softly, Rest, Mom. We'll talk when you're stronger. Later that night, Bianca texted me. She said you holding her hand meant more than anything else. And I replied, then maybe she's finally learning what love really looks like. The hospital became quieter that winter. Patients trickled in with frostbite flu and fractured hips. But my mind kept returning to one thing. How full circle moments rarely feel like revenge. They feel like release. The people who once dismissed you, you don't rise to prove them wrong. You rise so that their words lose power altogether. So that when they whisper, I never expected this from you, you can smile and say, exactly. ***. The spring after my mother's recovery, I stood on the rooftop of the new surgical wing named after me, staring down at the city below. The air was cool and clean. The kind of morning where the sky felt open, like possibility had decided to stretch wide just for me. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about proving anyone wrong. I wasn't thinking about my family, or my past, or even the moments I used to fantasize would feel like justice. I was just still. I had become the kind of woman I once needed as a girl. The kind who listens. The kind who leads. The kind who doesn't just survive the silence, but owns the room when the silence breaks. Months passed. Life moved forward. Bonka had her baby, a girl. She named her Elena. When I first heard, I thought it was a joke. But she texted me later that night and said, she's not named after me. She's named after who I wish I had been brave enough to be all along. And somehow, that mattered, more than any apology ever could. One day, I was invited to deliver the commencement address at my alma mater's medical school. The same university where I used to sit in the back of the lecture hall, too nervous to raise my hand. Now, I was speaking from the stage. As I walked out in my tailored navy gown. A sea of white coats filled the courtyard. And somewhere in that crowd, there was a girl who looked just like me once. Hair pulled back, circles under her eyes, maybe carrying shame, maybe carrying grit. So I spoke to her. There are people who will never clap for you. They'll tell you that you dream too loudly, want too much, believe too deeply. Let them. Because one day, when you stand exactly where they said you never would, you won't need their applause. You'll realize you brought your own. The crowd stood. Tears ran down cheeks. And in that moment, I didn't feel powerful because they were cheering. I felt powerful because I didn't need them to. Back at the hospital, I continued my work. I started a mentorship program for underrepresented girls in medicine. Spoke to groups of high schoolers from inner city schools and rural towns, places no one bothers to recruit from. And one day, a 12-year-old girl came up to me, wide-eyed, nervous. She held out a homemade drawing. A woman in a lab coat with a crown. Is that me? I asked, smiling. No, she said. It's me. But I made it because of you. I knelt down, tears warming my eyes, and I realized this was the legacy. Not just the titles, not just the revenge, but the ripple. The reminder that your story isn't just yours. It's someone else's permission to rise. As for my family, we never became picture perfect. That chapter was never meant to be rewritten. But slowly, we found a new language. Theo finally said, "You've always been the strongest of us." Bianca called every few weeks, not to talk about herself, but to listen. And Mom, she made a quiet habit of asking, "How was your day?" And meaning it. It wasn't perfection, but it was peace. One night, After an exhausting 12-hour trauma shift, I passed by a nurse who had just joined our staff. She straightened when she saw me, eyes wide, respectful. "Dr. Bennett?" she asked nervously. "Yes." She smiled. "I just wanted to say thank you. I read about you in med school. You're the reason I applied here." I blinked. For a second, I saw myself in her. The girl no one saw. The woman no one could miss. "Then you already have what you need," I said. "Now go make noise." I walked to my car, heels clicking against the polished floor, and looked up at the lettering carved into the hospital wall. Dr. Lena Bennett Surgical Wing. Beneath it, in smaller gold letters, I requested myself. Asterisk for those who were told they were too quiet, too soft, too small. May you rise anyway. Asterisk. And in that moment, I didn't feel like the girl my family once forgot. Felt like the woman who built her own table, set her own seat, and invited the world not to validate her, but to witness her. Asterisk. They told me I failed. They said I wasn't enough. They celebrated everyone but me. But in the end, it wasn't revenge I wanted. It was recognition, and not even from them. From me. Because the most powerful thing I ever did wasn't becoming chief of surgery. It was realizing I was never the failure. They just never knew what success really looked like. Asterisk. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment "real revenge" so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know where are you watching from. Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy.